Thank you, Arthur. It was a master class. We're going to turn now to economic statecraft and look at one of the most significant tools any government represented in this room has, and that is Japan's Bank for International Cooperation, which leads in infrastructure financing. And we're going to hear from the chairman of the board of JBIC, Tadashi Maeda. He previously served as the CEO and in senior management positions. In many ways, Maeda-san has been at the forefront of Japan's economic security strategy formation for the last 2.5 decades at least, as long as I've known him, looking at political risk, looking at how Japan retools its infrastructure financing in a geopolitically competitive environment, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, how it works with Australia and the US to deliver results to developing countries in the Indo-Pacific and so forth. Maeda-san is sort of the master of the toolkit, but he's also a strategist. He has served as an advisor to governments on both sides of the aisle in Japan. He's currently an advisor to the cabinet of Prime Minister Kishida. So we'll hear from Maeda-san some observations of how it looks sort of in the front trenches, if you will, for JBIC, and then I'll engage him on some of the issues we have been talking about during the day. Maeda-san, thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, the distinguished participants to this very important workshop. And I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to United States Studies Center here, host this event. As Dr. Michael Green very kindly introduced myself. He and I is close friends for more than 3 decades, since I was in Washington, D.C. Twice, back to early 90s and also that early 2000. Dr. Green, as you know, that at the time he was a senior director of NSC at Bush 43 administration. I frequently had a touch with him during that time. By the way, this morning, everybody saw that, watched the news that President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, paid a visit to Pyongyang, and were very warmly received by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. I'd like to remind you all of that fact that the North Korea is now still under sanction, and since 2006, for 11 years, UN Security Council adopted 11 resolutions to condemn the North Korean regime and to force them to destroy and abandon the perfect and verifiable, irreversible abandonment of nuclear programs and the weapon of mass destruction and the ballistic missile. And that's a ground for the sanction imposed by the national community. And this 11 resolution was adopted by unanimous vote, including Russia. But what we watch right now is a totally opposite to the spirit of the UN Security Council resolution. And that's the reality we face right now. Early this month, I also participate to the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, together with many of the participants. This conference also may attend it. I served as a member of Council of WIWS for 4 years, between 2013 and 2017. And also I served as advisor to the former Prime Minister Abe, and now currently Prime Minister Kishida. And the former Prime Minister Abe requested me to play a role of backdoor channel to Russia. And upon his request, I created Russia-Japan Investment Fund, which is a $1 billion fund. And therefore, because of these activities, I had a chance to have a meeting with President Putin for 19 times bilaterally. So that I was so depressed by that most recent aggression by Russia to Ukraine. And I saw that the also Chinese defense minister, together with a Secretary of Defense of the United States and others at Shangri-La Dialogue. On day 2, the defense minister of China delivered that speech on the day 2, the first plenary session, day 2. And he reiterated that rhetoric of the China toward Taiwan, and ignored that any intervention by the moderator. He repeatedly reiterated rhetoric on its own to Taiwan Strait, and also he condemned the U.S., the maritime forces, navies to uphold right of freedom of navigation in East China Sea and South China Sea. And on the day 2, also that last plenary session, President of Ukraine, President Zelensky appeared. I saw that the whole Chinese audience left during that time. That's the reality. So and after 2 weeks later, the Swiss government hosted that global peace summit. Obviously, Russia, China were not there, and only 92 countries attended, and they undermined this effort by Swiss government and other international community. Therefore, this is a reality. That's mind of that old book of a 20 years crisis, written in 1945 by British historian Edward H. Carr. It's described that the kind of a competition between the realism and the euphorism. And now we may have to remind of that the fact that the E.H. Edward Carr wrote in the book, and he also wrote in that book that both military power and soft power, the economic power, have to exist together. That's a very important messages by the historian Edward H. Carr. So we are now facing this reality. Therefore, that now Japanese government is now working on the very important and powerful the issues, which is a economic statecraft, and also the together with coordination together with like-minded countries. In April, on April 7th, the Japan, United States, Australia, and the Philippines made a joint exercise by maritime and air forces to uphold the right to the freedom of the navigation and the rule of the law. At the Shangri-La Dialogue, the president of the Philippines, Fernando Dumaldez Marcos Jr., delivered his speech. He also very strongly advocated for the rule of the law, and he clearly said that the cooperation among like-minded countries to support this rule of the law is very important. And our country, Japan, also that is changing the course. And Prime Minister Kishida already committed to increase the defense budget from 1% to GDP to 2% GDP. And also that he followed that the course by former Prime Minister Abe for national security pass. And in April, the Prime Minister Kishida was invited by President Biden as a state guest, and he delivered his own speech at a joint session of the US Congress. And this is a very strong commitment by the government of Japan. The JBIC, as Dr. Green referred to, as a very strong instrument of government of Japan on economic statecraft. Today, I'd like to show that basically three areas. One is an energy transition towards a carbon neutrality to make new frontiers of this. Two is the strengthening of connectivity. Three, to make the supply chain of critical sectors, including semiconductors and others, the critical minerals, or more resilience. That's three not achieved only by ourselves. We need to have a cooperation among like-minded countries. The world of like-minded countries is very important. Where like-minded means that to share the key principle and also the freedom and the rule of law. That's very important. We have to remind of that the leaders, like President Putin, is also elected by the vote, so that he has some sort of the kind of support by the public, and so that he has some legitimacy. But it's very skillful to manipulate those views from the general public. Therefore, that he still has a very strongly overwhelmingly supported by general public. That we have to remind of. This is not so easy to let him change his course. And the other partner like North Korea, China, and others. So the world seems to be very divided. Therefore, that we need to always pay due attention to what's going on in a different camp of this group of different camp. So on the first issue, energy transition, Prime Minister Kishida announced his new initiative, Asia Zero Emission Community, AZEC. And Australia is a member of this AZEC, along with 9 members of the ASEAN countries, Japan, ASEAN, and Australia. And this is some resemblance of JETP, Just Energy Transition Platform of G7. The difference between JETP and the AZEC is that the AZEC is more practical and based upon the realism. JETP is more cookie cutter. The JETP does not address any role of natural gas as a transitional source of fuel, power, but AZEC did. And we are going to engage country by country, so that each country has situation so different. Therefore, that we don't want to have one only cookie cutter and one size fits all type of solution. We need to engage by country. In Vietnam, in July 2023, last year, myself and the Minister of Planning and Investment, Gwen Chi-jun, agreed to have a joint AZEC and GX promotion working team. Indonesia, and 2 months later, 2023, myself and Airlangga Hartarto, who is the coordinating Minister of Economic Affairs, I also agreed to set up this framework. Myself and Minister Airlangga is the co-head of this joint task force. In the Philippines, in April this year, I agree with Secretary of Energy Rotia to create a very similar framework, co-head with me. And because the situation of Philippines are totally different from Vietnam or Indonesia, because the power generation sector has been privatized more than 20 years ago. There was no state-owned player in the Philippine power generation sector. Therefore, that I ordered my staffers to sign the MOU with the 3 private players, which is Aboitiz Power, Metro Pacific Investment Corporation, MPIC, and San Miguel. Those 3 players play a pivotal role in power generation in the Philippines. And also I had a meeting with the leaders of the American hyper-tech companies, including OpenAI and also Oracle and others, mega hyper companies. They are now working on making the GPU and using a massive volume of the massive volume of the power, especially from clean energy, renewable energy in particular. And also the GPUs needs a lot of semiconductors, the supply chain, not just only a chip itself, but also the processing and the downstream is also very important. And one vulnerability is too much concentration on the Taiwan on this, so that the TSMCs and others are very polarized this sector, so that even in a peaceful reunification with Chinese, that's also the risk that the China's monopoly will gain more power in this sector. Therefore, that we need to have two different scenario. One is a military aggression scenario, and also the other one is a peaceful reunification scenario. We need to be prepared to two different scenario. And on a power, by the way, that's so for the time being, the more than 10 gigawatts, the additional power are required for these GX and also data transformation, DX. Therefore, this is a reality. This is not illusion. Therefore, that we have to be prepared. And roughly, the cost of the power from renewable energy in Japan is 14 to 15 cents per kilowatt hour. It's too high. And in the case of China, it's 4 cents per kilowatt hour. India, 4 cents per kilowatt hour. Also, the country like Malaysia, country like Laos, also compared with the size of economy, market, the excessive capacity is there. Therefore, that the 10-cent gap is very, very huge. So that if it's make up by the subsidy, annually, that government is required to supply those subsidy to make up the gap, which is very much for the fiscal situation. This is very problematic. And Australia and Japan is a very natural partner because Australia is a resource-rich countries. We are not. The problem of Australia is a weak platform of manufacturing sectors. Therefore, that we are both supplemental law among that the Japan, Australia, and the United States, and by adding India to be a quad. But India is more delicate and sensitive because India's tied with Russia for many years. But my friend, Dr. Jaishankar, who is the Minister of External Affairs of India, privately said to me that India is very gradually shifting towards the West. It's not so easy to cut off the tie with Russia in terms of military cooperation. However, he said that he understands that reality, therefore that very gradually, slowly, but shifted to the towards. Therefore, we need to encourage those direction. That's why I'm now a steering committee, a global advisory board member of the Indian think tank Observer Research Foundation, ORF. And I participated every year to the Lycaonia dialogue in Delhi, and also this year, it's the first time Japan hosted a Lycaonia event, roundtable in Tokyo. I hosted this event together with a Keizai Doyukai. This is a Business Activity Executive Association of Japan. So that we invited the 100 guests. Out of 180 from Japan and India, but the remaining trainees includes the United States and Australia, and also the island countries. I invited Deputy Prime Minister of Fiji to the event. Deputy Prime Minister Prasado attended. So this is a very small steps and small effort, but the engagement is very important. Therefore, that not just only energy transition, but also that we have to work on the supply chain issue. It's very critical. Japan clearly remember that what China did in 2010, when that fisherman's boat, the collision with the Japanese Coast Guard, the ships, and we arrested the captain of the fisherman boat. And then China, as the retaliation, to put a ban on the export of rare earth element to Japan. This is one of execution of economic statecraft by China. That's the reality. So we do not have any illusion. So what they're talking is opposite to what they're doing in some sense. Not 100%, but not some sense. That's the reality. So Australia and Japan need to strengthen more cooperation in economic sense. The JBIC reopened as representative office in Sydney 2 years ago. And also that the government of Niges, Prime Minister, in May of 2024, last month, it's already, they announced its future gas strategy. And also that we also signed a MOU with a leading industry, including Woodside and Santos. So that this is an effort, very small step, but this is a really basic platform. And also the JBIC signed an MOU with the state of Western Australia and also of Northern Territory as well. Not just only the government in Sydney, government in Canberra, but also there was a municipal, provincial level, state level. We need to have a more deepened cooperation. On hydrogen ammonia, this is very important, the frontier for both of us. I had the meeting with my colleagues from Republic of Korea, and Prime Minister Kishida and Prime Minister President Yoon agreed to cover that full supply chain of hydrogen ammonia. Because in the US, the massive subsidies now available for hydrogen ammonia by means of Inflation Reduction Act. But this is not clear yet that those hydrogen ammonia can be deployed to outside from the United States. Therefore, that this is very important to cover this full supply chain of hydrogen and ammonia. Connectivity, JBIC, DFAT, and the EFA and USDFC signed MOU among trilateral cooperation. And this we created trilateral infrastructure partnership. The first case that we provided funding for that submarine cable to Palau. And also second case is the acquisition deal of Digital Pacific to block that acquisition by the China Telecom. That's a second case. And by adding India to Quad, this event to be already share this with India as well. And most recently, when I paid a visit to Washington, D.C., I had a meeting with Mr. Amos Hochstein, also Secretary of Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, and we discussed that the cooperation to the Luzon corridor in the Philippines, and also that from USAID that we received that request for support to open land in the Philippines. So that in last month, that the Luzon Economic Corridor Steering Committee, the first meeting was held in Manila, so that we participated too. The third issue, the supply chain issue, that already I already referred to in some sense, that the one is hydrogen ammonia, and ammonia can be used as a fuel of the vessel. And the German company MAN already manufactured that engine to use that ammonia as a fuel of the vessel. And we are now going to deploy and materialize this fuel of a vessel from ammonia. And also hydrogen. Ammonia is compatible. Hydrogen, because of a low energy intensity, this is very costly right now. Then roughly, that's the cost of hydrogen is in between $400 and $450 per ton. we need to reduce this cost substantially and to make this cost, hydrogen ammonia more affordable. Therefore, that not just only that as a fuel to the electricity, our industry can underpin that this accumulation of hydrogen, especially in the steel mill sector and cement sector. Therefore, that JBIC provided funding for Nippon Steel of the acquisition deal of Essar, which is a bankrupted steel company in India. We provided very massive, almost more than $5 billion US equivalent funding for them. So, and also that as a goal of ASIC I referred to first, we need to make the more transparent and science-based global standards based upon carbon intensity, not the color. Everybody says that green ammonia, green hydrogen, but no definition is made clearly. Therefore, my idea is to share these global standards based upon carbon intensity, so that in this regard, we can make use of the blue hydrogen and blue ammonia as well, and using technology of carbon capture and storage, CCUS. We provided some support of this attempt in Australia. In the Latrobe Valley, for example, of the hydrogen made of lignite, and the carbon capture storage technology is applied to that under the ground in Victoria. So that's a couple of examples that we are still working, and also that sharing the same goal. So in 2022, Japan and Australia government signed agreement of partnership concerning critical minerals. So that this is not just only the critical mineral ore, but also that full supply chain, downstream processing, everything. So that this is very important issues we have to face up. And in this regard, not just only by JBIC, but also that we are going to encourage all Japanese private sectors and the private businesses to be engaged with a partner in Australia, a partner in the United States, partner in India, and others like-minded countries. That we need to demonstrate and show the path and roadmap towards the goal. And then this goal must be shared among those private sectors as well. That's my messages I'd like to deliver in front of these distinguished audiences and participants. And also thank again for USSC inviting me, and thank again for my dear friend, Dr. Michael Jonathan Green. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very, very much, Maeda-san. As you can tell, Japan has an incredible tool in JBIC's financial resources and strategist and financial diplomat in Maeda-san. And Japan actually has a quite long history of successfully using infrastructure financing in geopolitical competition. I teach in class and have written about this delicious episode in the early 20th century during the Taft administration in Washington, where the US State Department was watching this competition for geopolitical control of Asia as Britain and France and Russia and Japan were financing railroads and telecommunications infrastructure in northern China and Manchuria. And the State Department decided, for the open door and to keep China resilient, we would create an American consortium. And we would create a railroad connectivity that would connect Beijing to Harbin and break the hold of the imperial powers. So State Department got together all the big banks in New York, First National Bank, Loeb, JP Morgan, the only one that still exists. And they sent the consortium to Asia, and they did their due diligence, and they came back and they raised a lot of money in New York. and did a major investment in the Japanese railroad because the return on investment was so good and it was so well designed. A little bit of a lesson in American statecraft history. Of course, JBIC did not exist then, but in the current iteration, Maeda-san, JBIC's role has really, in some ways, been consistent, but has evolved quite a bit, particularly during Prime Minister Abe's time. I think the charter changed, the tool changed, the risk metrics for loans all changed because of geopolitical competition. Can you tell us sort of how you view that? Have you learned lessons about what works, what doesn't work, as you think about infrastructure financing in a much more competitive environment, particularly in this region?
Yes, thank you. First, before Prime Minister Abe's era, that JBIC's role is a more conventional type of export credit agencies, like Export-Import Bank of the United States, for example, that they based upon that the idea, which is a level playing field. Level playing field means that this is some sort of trust, or therefore that this is a cartel in some sense. It's based upon the assumption that OECD member countries are prevailing all of the economy in this financial sector, but it's not anymore. That the country like Brazil, a country like Russia, China, India, those are not members of OECD. Also the global south more broadly, they are growing, so that in terms of relative share, the OECD is decreasing. And then, therefore, this mindset has been changed. Very reactive, passive, the action to be a level playing field. Therefore, that we need to be competing each other. That's not just a cartel. That's one issue. The second is risk taking is not so easy because we need to mitigate the risk, and also that we make the project program bankable. Therefore, that we need to engage in the project from day one, early stage. Therefore, otherwise it's very difficult to financing. Especially the infrastructure, for example, the infrastructure is revenue source is so much profitable from day one. Therefore, that in later they gain some cash flow. Therefore, that cash flow management is very important, and also that's the third, not just only debt financing, but also by means of the amendment of such a charter. Such charter is a public law. And therefore, it's not so easy to persuade a member of Diet, like member of Congress in the United States, for example. That is very, very hard. The mindset to them is mainly for cost cutting. So reducing the number of staffers, reducing the salaries of civil servants. That's the mindset of. We need to change. For example, the Singapore, that's the average salary of very high-ranking offshore is almost 10 times as high. That we need to change. Therefore, that we need to have some function like equity investment. And most recently, Prime Minister Kishida has announced its program for supporting a startup, but he does not know the detail about how they could doing. Therefore, that they have confusing some of that private equity guy like Mr. Larry Fink of BlackRock. For that, BlackRock is investing mainly listed company and securities, and more recently that they're going to embark on the infrastructure. But it's a totally different business model, not startup. So that's we need to tell them how this difficulty. We need to create ecosystem for supporting startup in Japan. So that's a kind of a pathways that we started from a very passive export credit agency to that more cutting edge, the leader of a spearhead of this movement to eventually to make an ecosystem for financing to startup.
And the U.S. Ex-Im Bank and the U.S. system noticed that, and Congress passed legislation creating the Development Finance Corporation, which was meant to move the U.S. system closer to what JBIC does. And then, as you mentioned in your remarks, the United States, Australia, and Japan signed the Trilateral Investment Partnership. And there have been specific cases like the undersea cable where we've worked together. But what reflections do you have 5, 6 years later on how easy it is for friends and allies to work together on infrastructure financing in the current environment? There's big differences in our systems.
Yeah.
And DFC is not like JBIC. And the Australia system is different again. But what do you take away from 5, 6 years of cooperating under this new framework?
Right. On a DFC issue is that a big major difference between JBIC and DFC. DFC has a boundary of a recipient in terms of the per capita GDP of the country. Therefore, they are not able to provide funding for high-income countries. But we, JBIC, can do the financing even to the United States, Australia. We disregard that per capita GDP. We can do it if it's strategically important. We can do. Two, that DFC does not know exactly what's the situation of the developing countries. They are not very much the negative on the financing to state-owned enterprises. But many countries, state-owned enterprise play some role. I already told this to the top senior government officials, including my friend Campbell, and also the U.S. Congress. But this, I found that this is not legal issue. This is a policy issue. Therefore, that they need to make a kind of guidance to change the USDFC more practical.
So, in addition to fixing the U.S. system, which sounds right, what's the lesson you take away in terms of working with the U.S., Australia, Korea, Canada, the EU? Is it, in development assistance, in grants, donor coordination is actually very difficult, and professionals are finding that sort of strategic alignment is the way to go. Is that a similar story for development, for infrastructure financing, that rather than joint financing of projects, sort of looking at the geopolitical and economic map and having areas of effort is a better way to go? Or do you think we'll actually improve our ability to coordinate infrastructure finance, do joint projects together?
Well, in my view, we need to mobilize more funding, not just from private sector, by the way, but not only the conventional commercial banking, but also that the money from, for example, that pension funds, for example. And their appetite of risk is different. Risk appetite is different. Therefore, I discussed with Larry Fink of BlackRock how to materialize this, so that he's already did the structured fund. The JBIC and also that institution like KfW of Germany took the mezzanine piece. And the World Bank Group, ADB, is requested to take this first loss. And then the senior can be funded by pension, for example, the massive. Therefore, that this is a very important, and this type of function. I already talked to World Bank President Ajay Banga this case, but even Ajay Banga is a reformist. He's a little bit reluctant to work on taking the first loss. Like World Bank Group, for example, the IDA. This is a very conventional provider of a grant for poorest countries. But not only the poorest country, they need to take the first loss infrastructure in more competitive and more strategically important countries. For example, that now I discussed with Amos Hochstein of that financing to so-called Lobito corridor in Africa. In Africa, like Zambia, Angola, and the People's Republic of Congo. That's very hard because of taking in the mind of risk of People's Republic of Congo. This is very, very tough. But we need to have a more flexible approach to bring the different funding, both private and public, from the different risk appetite. We need to coordinate. This skill set to coordinate this is very important.
It sounds like your sense is that culturally, if you will, BlackRock, KK, others in the private sector are as Ziad said earlier, seeing some silver lining to geopolitical competition and thinking about investment, working with JBIC in different ways. It sounds like there is some positive movement there.
Yes, I already discussed this very deeply with Mr. Larry Fink and also Mr. Henry Kravis of KKR.
You meeting with super funds here in Australia?
Yeah, not yet, but I'm delighted to do.
Fourth largest pension fund in the world, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Let me end with China. We had a great series of comments about how we all interact with China going forward as we compete. I noted Suzuki Sensei said Japan's goal in competition is not to quote unquote win, but to get to a place where Japan can actually survive with China in the same room. Jonathan Fritz from the State Department earlier said the goal of the US strategy is not decoupling, and we heard from Secretary Kennedy from the Treasury some guardrails about how to make sure that strategic competition doesn't upend economic development, prosperity. In 2018, you and I talked about this. You went to China with Prime Minister Abe and signed a deal with the China Development Bank. The idea being that while there is strategic competition, you're all bankers, and you all have to worry about sovereign risk and debt and all those sorts of things. So there should be some common basis, even with the China Development Bank, for talking. Mixed success. How do you see that now?
We still work with the China Development Bank and China Export-Import Bank. However, that after that, the lockdown, the COVID-19 era, that behavior has been changed. And they did not make any decision without direct intervention by the top leader of Chinese Communist Party. Their decision is paralyzed because they are very scared of the deaths for that any attacked by the Communist Party leaders. For example, that before COVID-19, there are daily 500 demonstrations in the street every day. But now, zero. Very down zero. This is very extreme because it's now under surveillance, reconnaissance by monitoring. There are people, they are skillful. Therefore, that many Chinese, the business leaders are now evacuating. They are now leaving Japan, for example. They're playing golf, like Jack Ma also playing golf in Japan. That's what happened. Therefore, that there must be, we still keep in touch with those people. Therefore, that I have some direct kind of a channel. I already started open a direct channel to the top of China Communist Party's foreign affairs guys.
Maeda-san, thank you. We've heard some really interesting, really strategic insights from colleagues from Korea, from Japan. Europe is waking up now. So we're going to take a coffee break. We'll have a panel, then we'll start hearing from speakers who are currently in Paris and Brussels and get more of an EU perspective. So let's take a coffee break. We will let you know, but let me just remind you now. We'll come back for a 3:30 address by Matthias Cormann. So let's thank Maeda-san for coming from Tokyo and sharing his insights.